Hey everyone, welcome to the Pulse on Learning podcast, where everything we discuss is all about learning and development. Over here at KnowledgeStaff, we're a resource and tool to the learning community. Our podcasts are designed to be interactive interviews discussing the latest news, trends, insights, and analysis in the L&D world. Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode to the Pulse on Learning podcast. I'm your host, Jason Kapool, and alongside me I have two very special guests. We have Ross Squire, the president over at KnowledgeStaff, and Carol Szatkowski, who's the founder and president over at ClearPoint Consultants. How are you guys today?
Very well, thanks, Jason.
Doing well here as well.
Excellent. Well, I think the best way to start off this conversation is if you guys can both provide our audience a little bit of an introduction on who you are, what your story's about, a little context to you and your business, and things of that nature. Want to start us off, Carol?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I've been in the recruiting space for 30 years. I started ClearPoint Consultants back in 1989, and after working for a few years at a general staffing company, I really was excited about specializing. And at the time, the areas that seemed to get the least amount of attention got my attention, and that was training, technical training. At the time, e-learning wasn't really a thing, but technical training, course development, and technical writing were very sort of underserved in general staffing. So I decided to specialize in those, and that's where I've built my entire business over 30 years. So that's how I got started. How about you, Ross?
So I guess my background is kind of similar. I came out of school a long time ago, back in the 80s, and just fell into a job recruiting mostly for high technology people, and then got a call from an old college buddy who said, hey, if you come and start our staffing business, we'll make you a partner. And that company was mostly focused in the technical writing world, and we also did a little bit of training early on. But that's kind of how I fell into it. And then over the years, I worked for that company for 17 years, and when that ended, I actually worked for Carol. That was a great experience for me. I opened up a New York office for ClearPoint, and then opened up KnowledgeStaff. I guess it was probably about 2002, and the company really focuses primarily in the learning and development space. For me, Carol and I go back a long time. We originally were competitors when we opened up a Cambridge office. And what I always appreciated about Carol and her company is that they were different than other companies. Back then, the word headhunter didn't really have a positive connotation. Headhunters were known for being sleazebags and money-hungry sales kind of people. And what I saw as different in Carol is that her business was really about servicing people and supporting people in their career development and supporting companies and identifying the best people, which was very much how our business operated. So while we were competitors, it was always, I always looked at it as friendly competition, and it was a company that I always admired, so much so that I reached out to Carol when I left that original company that I worked for. So Carol and I go back a long way, and I hold her in the highest regard. I consider her a good friend and kind of a business confidant. So it's a pleasure to have you on our first podcast episode, and hopefully we can share some insights from 30 years, or it's more than 30 years of servicing the learning and development space.
Yeah, thanks, Ross, for those words. And my experience with you is obviously the same. So really so happy, because it was like there was always a mutual admiration society here a little bit, even when we were competing, and then working together, and then for a while working together, and now sort of having our own businesses. And we're in similar, but we have a little bit different spaces each. It's been great to be able to share just kind of what we're learning as we go along in the business, as things change out there in the world in general. So it's been fantastic relationship for me as well. So thanks for inviting me.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about the learning and development marketplace. We can talk a little bit about staffing and consulting businesses. We can talk a little bit about maybe our experience in terms of what separates, those top 5% learning professionals from all the others. So maybe you can talk just a little bit about, if someone is out there and they're looking for support in finding either a consulting assignment or a new full-time job, what advice would you have for people that are looking for like a consulting firm or an agency to kind of work with?
Well, good question. So I think it's really important when this is about sort of agencies in themselves, is when you're looking for a job to understand who it is that's representing you, how they work, and what they would do, what they would do with your personal information. So this is the first thing that I would tell you if you're looking. It's good to make a couple of very good relationships with a couple agencies, I would say. It's not like you have to be absolutely exclusively reliant on one agency or one company, but when you're vetting and talking to a company that you might want to work with to help you find a job, asking them, sort of what their history is, what kind of clients they serve, how they, do their business, what their sort of general practices are with their consultants, how they communicate, would be really important to know. It's super important. The most important thing is to know that if you indeed decide that you're going to, work with this particular agency, that they've given you agreement that they won't send your resume, your portfolio, or your samples to anyone without your permission. That this is always kind of a one-on-one experience. And if you don't feel that level of trust in them, then that's really not a good idea to sign up with them. So that's what you're looking for, is someone you feel like you understand that's how they work, and that you will get communicated in terms of, any opportunities they have, and that they'll be really direct and clear with you about sending your resume or not. So that's what I would say. How do you feel? What do you think, Ross?
I think that's spot on. I think many people don't realize that you as the learning professional really can dictate how you're dealt with. And
correct.
The agents work for you. It's not the other way around. So you certainly have, exactly as you said, you should know everywhere the resume is going before it's sent. You should be kind of the gatekeeper to make sure that your resume doesn't show up on the same person's desk more than once. And any agency or consulting firm that you work with that doesn't agree to that or doesn't abide by that, you shouldn't work with. Because there's nothing worse than having a resume show up on the same person's desk from more than one source. It just shows a lack of professionalism, not just on the part of the agency, but really on your part as the professional. Yeah,
agree. So that is, and it takes some phone calls and some chatting with people, because there's a lot of agencies, and there's a lot of there's just a very wide breadth of people who work in this business. So you really should take care to work with people you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and also to find people that know what you do. There are a lot of generalists out there, but what's really important is to find a staffing firm to work with that can talk to you about opportunities that make sense, that represent the next step on whatever career path you've chosen. And if the firms don't have some understanding of the learning and development space, it's going to be much more difficult. So I think I would add that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree.
So let's talk a little bit about learning and development candidates. And we've been doing this a long time, and over the years, there are people that just stand out as being the best. And maybe talk a little bit about, what is it that you see that kind of separates that top 5%, the people that you have no hesitance putting on an assignment or sending in for an interview? What are some of those attributes?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I can name the three things that I feel like are the very important, attributes of like the top L&D performers, if you will, or candidates. And these sound, they perhaps sound general, but they're not at all. And number one is first of all, that they understand the business problem that they're trying to solve with their work. So they put themselves in line to understand the greater objective of, so I'm not just coming in to do this piece of e-learning, but like, what's the, why, and they understand that. Number two thing is that they really can speak clearly and confidently with the client. Their client-facing skills, their understanding, their listening skills, really, really key. And lastly is their communication skills. So them being able to talk to the client, to understand, to communicate what they can and can't do, and to understand the larger objective of the project or the work that they're doing. When people do those things, they stand out to the client. The assignments, they do the assignments, they complete them successfully, they get more and more work. They're the people that people want to ask for because of those skills. So if you have those business skills as a L&D, designer candidate, you will definitely outshine, I think, your competition. Those are my thoughts. What would you? How would you answer that, Ross? What would you say?
I would agree with everything you said. I would probably there's something about the better people that they're always ahead of wherever the market's going. They have a pulse on how things are getting done today. They are typically the ones that are figuring out or testing out the new technologies or the new approaches. And they're typically the people that I rely on when I have questions about something or an approach or whatever else. The other thing is that better people, in my mind, they're experts at managing.
I would say the always be learning people, who are just not just doing the job, but knowing kind of exactly what the trends are, what are like some new thoughts on better ways to get that learning absorbed, and communicated. Absolutely, you're right. So the learning piece is huge. Like having that as part of their DNA, that also stands out hugely.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is that they know how to manage their commitments. So, every project has challenges, and when there are breakdowns, they approach the breakdown responsibly. They come at it from not a problem, but here's the breakdown, here's the solution, and they're just honest, and their integrity levels are just, for whatever reason, they seem to be higher than others. I mean, there are people that I just trust with my reputation, because every person that we put out there on an assignment really is a reflection of me and in your case, you, Carol. So, they recognize that and they see it as kind of a win-win-win. It's not just about them and the client winning, but also they include us in that equation.
Yeah, I totally agree, Ross. Yeah.
Great. So, we talked a little bit about consultants, but it also applies to people that are out there looking for new full-time work. And I don't know about you, but one of the things that I find missing sometimes in people that I work with, and it makes my job pretty difficult, is that there's kind of a lack of clarity of where they want to go. So here it is, they're leaving a job or they've left a job, and when you try to consult with them about, okay, what's that next job look like, sometimes there's that lack of focus, lack of clarity. It's almost as if their careers are not purposeful. It's more like they're stuck in this kind of career drift. How do you, when you come across a person that maybe doesn't have that sense of clarity, how do you work with them?
I try to give people the counsel, if you will, to really to sort of like almost take a breather, take a step back and take a break and think about what it is you want to do, and think about, in other words, answer those questions that you're asking, Ross. So what do you want to do? What do you want to see yourself doing in the future? How, let's think about some of these questions and sort of have them almost do some homework around it before you come back and work with them, or work with me, rather. So I understand when people are looking for, a career move, and they're not really plotting kind of what they're going towards. It's a really hit or miss as to whether you can really help them. I mean, you can put them in a job they can be unhappy in. So it's sort of like it's a lose-lose. So I like to sort of say to people, come back, you think about this, think what's important to you. If you don't know what's important to you, and if you don't want to sort of think about, plot out what you want, how you want to approach what you want to learn, then I can't really be very helpful, myself. So sometimes taking a step back and letting people think about it before you go forward is one way that I handle it. And but how do you have? What kind of advice have you given folks?
I think in everyone's career, you've got that decision where the fork in the road occurs, and you either decide that you have a desire or a passion to lead other people or manage other people, or that's not really of interest. You just want to be the best, contributor, the best performer as possible. And there's that first kind of fork in the road where at some point you have to make that decision. And even when you're on the fork doesn't mean that you can't go back and forth, but that's clearly one of the big decisions that we see. And then within the L&D space, there's so many different components within the learning project lifecycle. And I think it's important to figure out, like, what areas do you really, really enjoy? Where are your strengths? Is it collaborating with stakeholders and trying to design solutions? Is it pumping out the content? Is it doing more of the technology and the toolsmithing and working with the tools and the technologies? Is it managing that process? Is it getting involved in the measurement? Is it doing the platform facilitation? So for us, it's a matter of just trying to get the candidate clear on which components represent the areas that you are most interested in, which ones could you not do without, and which ones can you do without. And that there helps us to figure out which jobs to talk to them about, which opportunities. Because ultimately, when it comes to staffing business, we're only as good as our last placement. So put somebody in a job and they last 6 months or a year even, it's not always viewed positively by the clients. It's not viewed positively by the candidate. So for us, it's all about that long-term placement where we place somebody and they become a manager someday and they become a client. I mean, that's kind of nirvana for me.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, you did a good job of sort of breaking down the different pieces in this field as well, as to what people generally will be more drawn towards. And so again, I would spend a little bit of time sort of asking those questions, the same thing, and then if they're not clear on it, like see if they can come back and get a little clearer after they think some more about it. But sometimes you can just get the answers out of them.
That's great. Yeah, I also am surprised that, when we first started in the business, it was not uncommon to find one person working for a company for 20 or 30 years. I mean, it was almost like the norm back there where, if you were a good person, the company wanted to keep you forever, and they figured out a way to do it. And the company kind of created the career path for you, and that just doesn't exist anymore. And it's almost like these conversations about career really need to take place with your employer. We all have been in situations where we get stuck, where everybody invests lots of time trying to find that right full-time job for somebody, and we find the job and they get the offer and they accept the offer, and then all of a sudden we get that dreaded call on that next day where they've been made a counteroffer and they're staying. Do you have any thoughts in terms of like how people should approach their search when it comes to their current employer?
You said a whole lot there, so I'm going to, first of all, the fact that people change jobs so much more frequently, like than they used to, I mean, that's a given. And that's like, so exactly true. And it's in terms of you expecting to change jobs, actually, I would say at least, I don't want to say you have to change your job, but, I would say the norm for most high tech to me is like anywhere between 3 and 5 years in terms of changing jobs. To just at least feel like you're learning something fresh, or you want different experiences, because the different experiences are what builds your career in this time, in 2020, more than like staying in one place for 20 years did, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. But to your point about, talking about what to do with the employer that you do have, is to have the career conversation when you can, while you're with them, to see if you can maximize, your own career growth in that company to whatever end that would be. So it's not a good time. So having the conversation with them after you start looking, doing a search, and then you get counteroffered, that's like not the right sequence of events, and also, puts you actually in a more vulnerable position, even though you think you're not. If you take the counteroffer after after you've gotten another offer at a job that you decided to move towards, because you don't know really the agenda now of the current employer, unless indeed you have had that conversation about your career with them and where you're going. So again, to circle back, I would say, going into a new job or in your current job and saying, where am I? Where do I want to go? Am I happy? Is this taking me somewhere? That's something to start talking about with them right from the get-go, or right now if you're in a job, and to see and to have that partly determine when indeed you want to do your search.
That's perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think you really summarized it perfectly. The time for a company to step up and do what's right shouldn't be when their back is against the wall. And if the conversations are ongoing and they're on the table about where you want to go, and it takes an offer from another company to get the company to step up, is that really the company that you can rely on going forward? So I think that's perfect.
Yeah, agree.
What are some of the mistakes that you see L&D people make when looking for new jobs?
Yeah, that's so. The mistakes that they make, sometimes I think that when you're focused and you know what you want, okay, I think it's really important to not to talk to people before you make, for instance, judgments about maybe what you've heard secondhand, or what you've how you read a job description when there's where it doesn't feel like it's what you're really looking for, but you've heard it's different. I think that sometimes it's important to not rush to judgment and just cancel things. So I'm a big believer in you know where you're going, but it doesn't hurt to talk to people. So I believe that the more information and the more sort of opportunity you have to talk to a hiring manager, for instance, gives you a couple of things. First of all, it gives you usually an ability, or an opportunity rather, to ask questions that are sort of behind the scenes on the job, to see if indeed it does align with what you're looking for before you cancel out. So I would say that. The other thing, and this is one thing that's kind of funny in this time with what we're doing with remote work and social distancing that's being forced on everyone now, which is really kind of creating a work from home culture. But I would say a lot of times people would also make decisions purely on location and commute. And I would always advocate for the idea that should not be the biggest driver if you see a career opportunity that is exactly what you've been focusing on finding. So those are two examples I'd say. Talk to people and not commute drive it. Right now, of course, commute isn't driving anything. So that's kind of a moot point, and maybe it'll come back and maybe it won't, but I think there's going to be a lot more flexibility.
Great. All right, so we have a little bit of time left. Let's, for people that are out there and they find themselves either without a job because of what's going on in the marketplace today, or they're at that stage in their career where they're thinking that consulting might be the right lifestyle for them. What are some of the recommendations that you would offer? What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the things that people don't realize about consulting that they really should know? Let's talk a little bit about that.
So, I would say that when you're just going into consulting, if you're, for instance, if you're, thinking of that as an option after having left a full-time job, it's really important to understand it's really kind of a different game than going in and just being a full-time employee. There's a lot more that you have to be able to communicate about yourself. I want to say quickly, concisely again. Your understanding of what you can do for this company, this assignment, this consulting company, this project, whatever it is you're possibly looking at. So as you talk to people, you want to have a little bit different elevator pitch, if you will, about yourself, and be able to have that, and also to be able to understand that your responsibility is going to be a time defined project of sorts that you have to successfully complete to that client's satisfaction. So understanding that, there's not a lot of, breadth of ramp-up time and all that. It's going to be an attitude of, hey, I'm in here, I've got to be productive, I've got to, every hour that I'm billing, I'm going to be producing something for this client. So there's just a little bit of a mind change that you have to go through when you get into consulting. Being able to understand why they're hiring you, what is the problem they're trying to solve, and that you can be that solving that solution for them is really important. What do you think?
I think that in any opportunity, whether it's full-time or consulting, there's uncertainty and there's risk and whatever else. The thing that I find a lot of people that go into consulting don't realize is that their marketing and sales hat has to always be on. So even when you're on that assignment, you either have to be looking for that next opportunity, you have to be looking to see what other services you could be offering to that client. But it's really important that you have either a really strong network of people that you can tap into to get opportunities, or that you have relationships with consulting firms that specialize in the L&D space that can feed you opportunities, or that you just happen to be a very good marketer, because that's what separates the good consultants from the consultants that have a tough time finding consistent work. The other thing is that you really need to set yourself up as a business. You need to understand ramifications of being paid as a W-2 consultant, being paid as a 1099 consultant. You need to understand the tax liabilities that come with having your own business versus being a W-2 consultant. So I think that you really need to go into consulting with your eyes wide open to know, is it the right lifestyle? Do I have the temperament to put up with the uncertainty? And for those that do, it can be lucrative. And for those that don't, it could be, a really challenging, difficult time.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. So good points. It really is a lifestyle, a career style, a temperament style that you have to ask yourself, because you perfectly said, you are kind of always needing to keep one eye on the market, marketing yourself, and being able to, take the tension of knowing that, when you're closing on an assignment, you have to do a really good job and still get ready for that next assignment, which you have to be looking for. And that you might have a pause in between even. So this is something that not everybody can successfully do.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's also, when times are good and the opportunities are out there, you really can be selective with the kinds of assignments that you work on.
Yeah.
But when times get a little bit tougher, ultimately, it's the opportunity and what they're willing to pay that's going to dictate whether you make a living or not. So sometimes it means taking maybe that assignment that you really wouldn't want to take, but if the alternative is not getting paid at all, you just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So priorities have to shift based on what's actually happening in the environment and what opportunities you have or don't have. Absolutely.
So if you're a learning professional and you're listening today and you were trying to figure out, if I was going to invest some time or money or effort to learn something new, given what we're seeing in the marketplace for learning and development, what would you recommend? Where would you have them focus? What are some of the areas that you think are really kind of up and coming or will be in more demand as we move forward?
Well, everybody should know some of the basic or the e-learning tools that like Storyline, Articulate Storyline. Probably the most popular and the most well used, but there are others as well. But having samples of that and understanding some things about micro learning, micro e-learning, embedded learning, looking how people are using now even virtual reality, video-based learning, augmented reality. There's all kinds of new technologies that are coming into play as we go forward that are above and beyond, what the standard sort of beginning modules of Articulate in e-learning. And so keeping your eye on those trends yourself, and then seeing if you can, examples of it, if you can learn how to do it, gamification, all of these different trends that are all basically ways that the profession is trying to increase people's ability to learn faster and more efficiently. I think that's what I'm seeing, Ross. What do you think?
No, I think you hit them all. The only one that I would probably add is we're seeing more talk about learning experience design, which is kind of the application of UX into the learning space. So we're seeing more talk about that. The bottom line is that both Adobe with Captivate and Articulate with Storyline and 360 both offer a free 30-day trial version. So there's no cost.
Yeah.
In 30 days, you can walk out with having a decent understanding of the tool and a sample, which is what you need. With LinkedIn Learning, they're offering, I think, a 30-day free trial version also. So you can go on to LinkedIn Learning, access thousands and thousands of really good quality video on all these topics that we just touched on, and be able to do it for no cost. And YouTube also has an unbelievable amount of content that you might have to sift through a little bit more, but there's really no excuse. There's no reason why anybody shouldn't know what gamification is, how it could apply. You could always make the offer to your current employer to maybe do part of a module and implement those standards. Again, if we go back to the original question about what separates good people from the others, it's that commitment. It's recognizing that the trajectory and path of your career is on you. It's not on anybody else. It's your responsibility. And, I've always thought that everyone should have their own learning and development training budget. People should set aside $1,500, $2,000 to either attend a conference, take a class, do something to make sure that they're keeping up with where the marketplace is. So I think that those are kind of important things to do. And it doesn't have to cost money. It's just having the commitment to yourself to be as good as you can be.
Yeah, absolutely, Ross. And to your point, there's so much free learning in these areas out there right now, and it's not hard to find out even through L&D blogs and learning places that what the trends are, what examples are, what people are thinking about. It's definitely worth investing in you in making that commitment and getting some of that progressing, moving yourself forward in whatever way you're drawn to, but moving yourself forward.
Excellent. Oh, listen, I really want to thank you for spending some time with us today and being our first guest on our podcasts. I hope that for the viewers and listeners, actually not viewers, but listeners, that you were able to come away with a couple of pearls of wisdom that hopefully can support you in moving your careers forward. So, Jason, is there anything else that you wanted to say in terms of wrapping up?
No, I think you guys covered it all. We went over a wide range of material today. Want to obviously thank you both for taking time out of your busy schedules to speak with us, and also to all of our listeners out there for joining in and listening to our first episode that we've created here for the Pulse on Learning podcast. And I hope everyone was able to take away some information here, but I think this about closes us out. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Pulse on Learning podcast. To all our listeners out there, we want to thank you very much for tuning in. If you have any questions about our podcast or any staffing and consulting needs, or perhaps you are looking for a career change in yourself, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@knowledgestaff.com. Again, we want to thank our listeners, and until next time, this is the Pulse on Learning podcast signing off.